Hello everyone, it's me again. I'm here with another video. Today's video will be a video that was supposed to come out yesterday, but I kind of felt like now is the time to release it. It's my own DC universe where I'm pitching it, so let's begin, shall we? The first show would be Green Lantern, the animated series. It's pretty much the same show because it was one of my favorite shows growing up when I was younger. And it would get the second season it desperately deserved. Now, for the storyline, it would basically adapt the Sinestro Corps War as it was originally planned, with Sinestro becoming, the Yellow Lantern and him forming the Yellow Lantern Corps. We'd even see that whole storyline of, Razor becoming the Blue Lantern and finding Aya. This would also be the season where John Stewart gets introduced. I could possibly picture someone like Jamie Foxx or Sterling K. Brown as John Stewart. I think either two would be great. And then season 3 would focus on the Blackest Night storyline. As the Blackest Night storyline was intended to be the big final storyline for the show, I think. This would be the season where Necron Black Hammer introduces the villains. Sinestro, Larfleeze, and Atrocitus return. After the latter two would be minor villains in season 2. Some of the new characters that would be introduced would be Jessica Cruz and Kyle Rayner, who Hal would take as an apprentice. So we get a mentor student storyline with those two. Indigo 1 would also make her debut in the show, thus we get introduced to the Purple Lantern Corps. And during the final battle, we see some lanterns dying, like Guy Gardner, Simon Boz, even some of the Blue Lantern Corps. Sinestro and Atrocitus would also die redemptive moments, as well as Larfleeze. And so Hal would, create the White Lantern Reign to defeat Blackhand and Necron with the help of Kyle Rayner, who Hal could possibly name his successor if you want to. But that's a possibility. Next is Beware the Batman. It's mostly the same show with some changes. First of all, if we're gonna, keep the continuity with, my What If Batman was in Green Lantern, the animated series video, Catwoman would replace Katana. Katana would be reduced to being more of a recurring character. And during late season 1, Barbara Gordon would become Batgirl. We'd even introduce Dick Grayson, who probably would have been Robin mid-season 1 before he becomes Nightwing in season 2. Speaking of season 2 would feature Batman facing... It was really hard to choose a villain at first, but I'm going to say Penguin and Black Mask. For Penguin, I could picture him like Pollock as Penguin, and Black Mask, I'd say maybe Joe Swayze, the actor who played All for One in My Hero Academia. Might do fan casts of those characters in the future. But season 2 would basically feature a crime war against Penguin, Black Mask, and Carmine Falcone, as well as Two-Face, who would now have his more comic accurate face. Joker, of course, would be a major threat, as some new villains would appear like Deadshot, Riddler, Mr. Freeze, as well as Clayface. But because Dick would become Nightwing this season, I think it's fair to say it would make sense to introduce Jason Todd, who probably would introduce when Dick becomes Nightwing. Now, if you're thinking, does this lead to like a death in the family storyline? It's something similar to that. Here, Jason ends up in Batman's hands because at some point, Jason's parents, were killed by one of Black Mask's goons. Could be Deadshot or someone random. But another villain would be KG Beast introduced in this season. He would be introduced when, Jason is Robin, and during the midpoint, Jason is gone. He faces Joker, but Jason isn't killed, he's just presumed dead because during an explosion, no one escapes. Well, Batman escapes along with some others, but there's no clear fate to Jason. However, in season 3, it's revealed Jason survived, but is heavily scarred. He even starts off this season as the Red Hood, with his current goal being to kill the Joker and kill all of Gotham's criminals. Harley Quinn would also be introduced in season 3 along with Tim Drake's Robin, Stephanie Brown's Batgirl, Clue Master, as well as Hush and the Court of Owls. During the midpoint of the season, Joker is nearly killed by Jason, but Jason stops because I picture a moment similar to the Under the Red Hood film, but Bruce would tell Jason that this isn't what his mother would have wanted. And so Jason, stops himself from killing Joker, but throughout earlier in the season, some villains would be killed, like Black Spider, Black Mask, KG Beast, as well as the Royal Flush Gang and the Terrible Trio. And during the final episodes of season 3, this is where the Batman is fully united against Hush. And Clayface also becomes a Hush's servant, along with Harley Quinn, who escapes. And there would be a Suicide Squad episode, which could set up a Suicide Squad spinoff. But for the team, I'm thinking Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, Copperhead, Rick Flag, and Prometheus, who I'm setting someone up for their own show. Definitely. So let's move on to the new shows I've made. The first of these new shows would be Superman Man of Tomorrow. Basically, season 1 would introduce Clark, Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Martha, and Jonathan Kent. I think that's all. Oh, no, wait. Sam Lane as well. As for the villain of season 1, this would be Lex Luthor, who would be the villain of the show. Lena Luthor would also appear as a side villain, along with other villains like Metallo and Livewire and Bloodsport. But during the second half of season 1, we'd introduce Zod, who would become the villain throughout the rest of season 1 until he is ultimately defeated. And then moving on to season 2, which shows Lex and Lena as the villains. Mostly Lex, but still. This is where the Public Enemy storyline would become the main focus of this season. Some new villains that would be introduced would be Parasite and Atomic Skull. One villain, well, not one villain, but one character that would be introduced this season would be Supergirl. Her whole storyline this season is about her trying to become a hero like Superman, until she and Superman see eye to eye together in the end. And our villain that would be introduced would be Silver Banshee. Season 3 would then focus on Brainiac, in which Season 3 would introduce Lobo as a secondary villain, and Lex and Lena would sit this season out. Mostly Lena, but Lex would be an ally of Brainiac. And then moving on to Season 4, which would introduce Darkseid and the New Gods. Darkseid would have people like Steppenwolf, Dazad, Granny Goodness, and the Furies at his side. And since this is the final season, there would be some deaths like Sam Lane, as well as Dan Turpin. And yes, Darkseid would kill Dan Turpin like he did in Superman the Animated Series. Another thing I forgot to mention is that in Season 3 of Beware the Batman, Alfred and possibly someone like James Gordon would die. But back to where I was with Superman Man of Tomorrow. Superman would defeat Darkseid eventually, but he wouldn't kill Darkseid. Darkseid would just be defeated. Next is Wonder Woman the Animated Series. Finally giving Wonder Woman her own show, as she deserves to. Now, Season 1 would be like a flashback type of season. Like, some episodes would be set during World War II, where she faces Dr. Poison, while present day would focus on her facing Cheetah, Arizria, and Cersei. Season 2 would then have Cersei take center stage as the main villain, where we introduce Giganta, and of course, Queen Clea, who acts as more of a minor villain in this season. And of course, Angleman also becomes a bigger villain in Season 2 than he originally was in Season 1. We get more development on Arizria and Diana's relationship. Apparently, after years of not getting along, they start to realize Arizria tore their childhood apart. She just got upset over the fact that, Diana was going to become the future ruler of Themyscira when she wanted to rule Themyscira by herself, but couldn't because she was adopted. We also get some insight on Arizria's backstory. It's revealed that her parents were killed during a war, which led to her in the hands of the Amazonians. She kind of fills in the same role Loki does in the MCU in later seasons. But Season 2 would end with Cersei defeated. Season 3 would then feature Clea as the central villain, along with Ares, who would become the villain in the second half of Season 3. We'd also introduce Crimson Flame in Season 3, along with I'm pretty sure that's for villains of Season 3. Oh, wait. Dr. Psycho. Then season 4 would adapt the Bloodline storyline, in which Cersei would team up with Veronica Cale, which would introduce Silver Swan, bring back Dr. Psycho, Giganta, and Cheetah. This season would also introduce Grail. Since this is like the final season, Hippolyta and someone like Artemis would die. Artemis would have been a character like since season 1 or 2, but later seasons would introduce Cassie Sandsmark, who would become the new Wonder Girl after Donna becomes, Troya, like in the comics. Next is Flash, the animated series. This would basically be one of the new shows, aside from, Superman and Wonder Woman shows. Season 1 would focus on Barry facing the Rogues, led by Gorilla Grodd. Grodd would be the villain in the second half, while the Rogues are the villains in the first half, led by Captain Cold. This is also where we get introduced to Joe West, Iris West, and Wally West, as well as Wally's father. Season 2 would then feature Grodd as the villain of the first half, but then the second half, Savitar would be the main villain. And of course, Reverse Flash would also appear as a one-off villain in the first episode. Then season 3 would roll around and Reverse Flash takes center stage as the main villain, along with the introduction of Killer Frost, Pied Piper, and Top. We even get to see the backstory of Reverse Flash and how he killed Barry's mother, killed his family, and of course decides to make history repeat itself, by killing Daniel West, Wally's father. And so Wally is almost at the point where he would try to kill Eobard Thwain, but is stopped by Barry. There'd also be an episode loosely adapting Flashpoint where Barry travels to a future where he died fighting Reverse Flash, and that left Wally as the new Flash. And the villain in that episode would be someone like Cold Blue, who is, like the ancestor of Eobard Thwain in the comics. Or in the Arrowverse, I think. More likely the Arrowverse, but still. But in the end, Reverse Flash would be defeated, and that would conclude Flash, the animated series. Next is Green Arrow, the animated series. Season 1 would be kind of like a flashback season, kind of like Wonder Woman's show. One half of the season would focus on Oliver and Dinah in their early superhero years, facing villains like Count Vertigo, Sportsmaster, and Blockbuster. While season 2 takes place in the present day, like, the later half of season 1, not season 2, where Dinah and Oliver are back in Heroes after being, retired. Blockbuster would be the villain of season 1, with Malcolm Merlyn as like a secondary villain. Sportsmaster would also be one of Blockbuster's henchmen, along with Cupid. Season 2 would then introduce Sportsmaster taking center stage as the main villain, along with Cheshire. And of course, Red Arrow would be introduced. Roy Harper. And we get signs of Connor wanting to be, more of his own hero. Wanting to be a hero like his parents, which then leads to season 3. which would see Count Vertigo leading the Ninth Circle, and so Oliver and the gang face the Ninth Circle. By this point, Connor is a teenager and has feelings for Mia Dearden. And of course, there'd also be appearances from the League of Assassins in each season, and Batman could appear occasionally. And not too sure who to kill off in this final season, but one thing is clear. At some point during the show, Sarah would become White Canary after, facing retirement, like her sister and brother-in-law. And we even see Connor becoming like a new hero, like I'd say maybe Black Arrow, to kind of merge his parents' identities into one. I guess you could say that. I don't know, really. But I guess it sounds like a good name. But the Longbow Hunters would also be some major villains introduced in like season 1. But Prometheus would also have been a villain during season 2. And of course a member of the Ninth Circle. Next is Aquaman, the animated series. Fun fact, I had intent for Aquaman to be the 7th member of the Justice League before I decided to replace him with Green Arrow and Black Canary. Season 1 would feature Orm and Black Manta as the villains. We also introduced Murrah, Calderon's Aquaman, and King Nereus, as well as Aquaman's parents and Vulko. Season 2 would then introduce Shark God as the villain. King Shark would definitely appear along with Red Lion. And Black Manta would also return along with Trident, a very obscure Teen Titans villain. The two Aqualads would be introduced. Calderon. And, of course, Jackson Hyde. And then in season 3, this is where we would feature the Trench and Atlan. Well, more so his brother Coridax. And of course, Siren, who was Murrah's sister, exiled from Zebel after killing their mother. And she would return for revenge by killing their father. Aquaman's mother would also be killed off as well as Calderon. And then the season finale, the series finale would feature Arthur and Orm facing Coridax, which would end with Orm's death. And at the end, Arthur and Murrah are now like the new king and queen of Atlantis, uniting Zebel and Atlantis into one. And now to the final show of this animated universe, which is Justice League, the animated series. Season 1 would focus on the founding members from my What If the Justice League were in Green Lantern, the animated series video. The villains would be the Legion of Doom. And they would unleash Starro the Conqueror during the season finale. Season 2 would then feature Brainiac as the main villain, as at one point he would send the Justice League to an alternate universe where they're evil. And yes, that would be the Crime Syndicate, who could be played by the same actors I already had the characters for, or maybe they could be played by the DCAU actors, Ultraman could be played by George Newborn or Tim Daly. Kevin Conroy as Owlman Susan Eisenberg as Superwoman. Michael Rosenbaum as Johnny Quick. Power Rain, I could see maybe Ryan Reynolds. But as for Sea King, probably Chris Hemsworth. But that's like the team I have right now. But someone would join the team during season 2. That would be Blue Beetle, the Jaime Reyes version, who I could see being played by maybe Josh Keaton. But this is where we can introduce Scarlet Scarab, who could be played by Will Fredley, who played him in Batman the Brave and the Bold. And then after that whole storyline is over, they face Brainiac again. And then moving on to season 3, which is where they would face Darkseid. Jon Stewart and Shazam would join the League, along with Booster Gold. There would be some sacrifices during season 3, like Flash, Ted Kord's Blue Beetle, who I might have introduced in season 2. I pretty much would have. And either Green Lantern or Superman or even Batman sacrificing themselves to defeat Darkseid. But another character that would be introduced during this show would be Connor Kent, Superboy. But before I get into season 4, here's another show I want to talk about. That would be Teen Titans Heroes of Tomorrow. Season 1 would feature like the team coming together, but the team I'm picturing in my head is a mix between the Titans from the original show and a bit of the original lineup from the comics. Those additional members would be Wally West and Donna Troy. The villain would be Deathstroke and the Hive. Season 2 would then include Bumblebee, Urgent, and Terra, who initially has feelings for Nightwing, but knowing Starfire, she probably would want to kill Terra. But eventually, that whole love triangle thing is done. But as for the villain, this would be Brother Blood. Sister Soul would also be introduced, as well as Mother Mayhem and Dr. Light. Season 3 would introduce the Grodions and Blackfire as the villains. This is also where you can introduce Geoforce, Terra's brother, Red Arrow, Aqualad, and of course, Cassie and Omen. Season 4 would then feature Trigon as the main villain, and Harold would be one of the new members introduced onto the team. And there would be some sacrifices like Hotspot, who I might have introduced in season 2, as well as Geoforce. But I think that's all I have to say about Teen Titans the Animated Series. One character that I could see join the Titans would be Cheshire. And now to the big finale, Season 4 of Justice League. Defenders of Earth, Anti-Monitor. Yes, this would adapt the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline. Side note, in Beware the Batman, I could also picture villains like Firefly and Killer Moth being introduced. But basically, the Monitor would warn the League about Anti-Monitor, and so Anti-Monitor would arrive and start to destroy, like, the multiverse, which can bring back the crime syndicate as well as characters that have died in past shows. Also, side note, Green Arrow would die in Justice League Season 3. He would have died during the Darkseid Wars storyline. In the end, Green Lantern, if he somehow would end up surviving the Darkseid Wars storyline, he and Dr. Fate would sacrifice themselves to undo the multiverse whole damage, thus allowing the universe to be rebooted. Simple as that. Like how the Crisis storyline usually ends. So that's my own DC animated universe. I could make my own Batman show in the future, but that's gonna be for a while. I'll be holding that off. But I can't give away too much. But anyways, I will see you all later.